I never imagined I'd find this heartbreaking act of sacrifice from a cashier. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. It started like any other day. The air was thick, almost suffocating. I was standing in line at the grocery store, my fingers trembling as I clutched a half-empty wallet. I glanced at the cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, dusted with the remnants of hope. She smiled faintly, but I could see weariness etched into her face, like an invisible weight pressing down on her spirit. As I waited, I noticed a little girl next to me, meticulously clutching a single, crumpled dollar bill. Her wide eyes darted between candy bars and the shiny packaging of chips, a treasure trove within reach but just out of grasp. I could feel her disappointment, an echo of my own unfulfilled desires. She turned to her mother, who looked strained, shadows under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. The line crept forward, inching along as I fought with my own inner turmoil. When it was my turn, I approached the register and watched as the cashier began ringing up my meager purchases. I felt guilty, standing there, and yet she treated me like I was the only person in the world. It was almost surreal. Just then, the little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing to the candy. "Mama, please," her voice quivered, and my heart sank deeper. The mother sighed, shaking her head. "We can't afford it, sweetheart. Not today." I could see the girl's spirit shatter in that moment. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and my chest tightened as I felt the unbearable weight of her heartbreak. It was just candy, but to her, it felt like the world. I looked back at the cashier, wondering if she noticed. She did. Her gaze shifted, a silent understanding passing between us. Suddenly, in an unexpected twist, the cashier grabbed a candy bar from the shelf behind her, and without a word, she placed it on my counter. "It's on me," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble beneath. My heart raced. I could hear the gasps and murmurs from the line behind me, people shifting in disbelief. I knew what that bar meant to the girl. But then, as I reached for my wallet, the cashier's eyes grew even more pained. "No, don't worry about it," she continued, fear mingling with defiance. It's just a bar. Layla, come here." I watched as she waved the little girl forward. The girl hesitated, unsure. The cashier smiled again, now filled with a fierce determination that brought tears to my eyes. "You deserve it. You can take it. Please." In that charged moment, I realized something powerful was at play. A sacrifice made in the most unexpected of places. The air shifted, and the world seemed to hone in on us, a circle of unspoken unity, binding us in that grocery aisle. But as the little girl took the candy, the cashier's eyes flickered with something darker. A fleeting moment of vulnerability, a haunting shadow that made me wonder what was she giving up for this act of kindness. I turned to leave, my mind racing, but the cashier caught my gaze one last time. It was a look of desperation, as if she was silently pleading for help. My chest tightened. Did she need saving too? Did she have a story that needed to be told? I couldn't shake the sense that something was brewing beneath the surface. Something unimaginable, yet so desperately human. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. It was a few days later when I returned to the grocery store, still haunted by the image of the cashier's pleading eyes and the child's innocent delight. I hadn't intended to come back so soon, but I found myself drawn to the place where kindness flickered, even in desperation. The moment I stepped through the sliding doors, the familiar scent of fresh produce and the faintly comforting hum of chatter greeted me. But this time, the atmosphere felt heavier, As if the weight of unfulfilled stories hung in the air. I walked towards the checkout aisles, scanning for the cashier who had so deeply etched herself into my mind. I didn't know why I wanted to see her again. Perhaps it was a sense of duty compelled by the gravity of her sacrifice, or a need to connect. But instead of her, an older man stood behind the register, his movements swift and practiced, cradling a permanent frown as he processed each customer. Disappointment flared within me. I decided to recheck the aisles, hoping she might be stocking shelves or taking a break. As I wandered aimlessly, I spotted a little girl again, quietly inspecting an assortment of brightly wrapped candies that now danced mockingly before her eyes. I felt a pound of empathy for her. That joyous smile she wore just days ago was now replaced with a somber demeanor. Watching her, I knew she was grappling with more than just the absence of a treat. "Hey, is it okay if you share your favorite candy with me?" I asked softly, kneeling down to her level. She looked up, startled as if my sudden interest had caught her off guard. "I don't have any," she replied, her voice small and defeated. "Mama said we can't buy anything today." My heart ached for her. "You know, sometimes a good friend will share their candy with you when you least expect it," I smiled, trying to coax her back into some semblance of joy. Just then, I heard the familiar voice, warm and comforting. "Is everything all right here?" It was the cashier, standing behind me like an apparition. The shadows under her eyes had deepened, the weariness more pronounced than before, but there was a flicker of light in her expression as she approached. "Yes, I was just talking to her," I said, nodding towards the girl. "I think she deserves something sweet." The cashier knelt beside us, her presence infusing a sense of safety and warmth. Only now did I notice the way the girl's eyes lit up at the sight of her, the tiny flicker of hope shining through her sorrow. "You remembered me?" the girl exclaimed softly, the shimmer of innocence in her voice pulling at disconnected strings of my heart. "Of course I did," the cashier replied, her voice tender yet strained. She reached out and took a candy bar from her pocket, offering it to the girl. "Here, love. This is for you." The little girl's face lit up, her excitement enveloped the three of us like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. But I couldn't ignore the undercurrents of tension swirling between us. The cashier's hand hovered too long over the bar, a hint of reluctance and worry flickering in her features like a candle flickering in the wind. "Why are you giving it to her?" I asked gently, curiosity lacing my words. Sometimes the hardest questions were necessitated by the simplest actions. She hesitated, and in that silence, I could almost feel the pounding of her heart. She lost her voice momentarily and glanced back at the little girl, who was now smiling through tears. Sometimes we need to share our happiness, even if it costs us." The melancholy sinking back into her eyes sent a chill down my spine. Just as the girl clutched the candy, a loud commotion erupted from the entrance of the store. A man was shouting, red-faced and wild-eyed, gesturing dramatically as he chanted accusations that sent shivers through the thrumming air. "You can't treat people like this. This place is a sham." All eyes turned towards the scene, and the cashier stiffened, her breathing sharp and quick. I watched her transform in front of me, the heroic gentle soul replaced by someone burdened, assaulted by a fear far deeper than any fleeting act of kindness could communicate. "Please, I need to go," she whispered, standing abruptly. I reached out just as she turned, catching her wrist lightly. Her gaze met mine, a torrent of emotion swirling between us: desperation, hope, and a tether of grief that begged for recognition. "Wait," I implored, aware that something monumental was unfolding in the depths of her stormy heart. But she slipped free, moving toward the ruckus, the little girl's laughter dimming behind her. In that moment, an unexpected fear coiled around my chest. Whatever was unearthing itself, it felt like a heavy truth threatening to unravel the fragile threads binding us in the throes of this grocery store drama. Would I find out the depths of her struggle? Or would I walk away carrying this weight, knowing I might let her slip away? And as I stood there, a painful twist gripped me, threading my heart with uncertainty. Why did this profound connection feel so far from the surface, buried beneath layers of unspoken words? And most importantly, Would I have the courage to confront whatever truth lay ahead before it slipped through my fingers forever? The store buzzed with the aftershocks of confrontation, the atmosphere thickening with palpable tension. I stood frozen, caught between the innocent laughter of the little girl and the chaos unfolding at the entrance. The man's shouts were like jagged edges tearing through the fragile veil of light and kindness that had momentarily enveloped us. With a deep breath, I steeled myself and followed the cashier, weaving through the startled customers paralyzed by the scene. As I approached, shadows of doubt crept into my mind. What could possibly be going on that was so severe it could necessitate such a display of anger? The man was towering over the store manager, a thin man in a poorly fitted suit who appeared flustered and defensive. You think this is acceptable? Taking advantage of good people who just want to buy groceries? He yelled, pointing fingers that seemed to pierce the air like daggers. His eyes burned with a fervor that suggested this wasn't just about a simple dispute over policies or prices. I spotted the cashier, her gaze locked onto the chaos, though her posture was rigid, revealing a struggle coiling within her. I couldn't ignore the rawness in her expression, the way her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak but found her voice lost amidst the cacophony. It was a familiar look, one I had worn myself when confronting my own battles, blurred by fear and uncertainty. What's happening? I asked aloud to no one in particular, though my eyes were set on her. She turned slightly, catching my gaze for a fleeting moment, and a flicker of recognition moved through her as if she sensed the mounting concern I felt. It's nothing, she murmured, but the tremor in her voice contradicted the calmness she tried to project. Just an upset customer. No. It's not just nothing. The man's voice boomed again, urging others to turn their attention towards him. This is systemic. Do you see how you're treating people? This is a disgrace. The cashier stepped forward, her presence now steady though it was tinged with anxiety. Sir, if you could please calm down, we can work this out, she implored, her words falling like gentle raindrops into the midst of a storm. But the man wasn't swayed, he continued to push, drawing in others with his fervent rhetoric. You think this is how community is built? Intimidation and neglect. People out here are struggling every single day. We deserve better. His anger ricocheted through the store, igniting something in the atmosphere, awakening dormant emotions that had long lingered just beneath the surface. I could see other shoppers shifting uneasily, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads, feeling the tension seeping into their nervous laughter. In that moment, my resolve surged, kindled by the knowledge that the cashier was as much a part of this community as anyone else in that room. She was linked to the struggles he spoke of, carrying burdens and dreams that often went unnoticed. I stepped closer to her amidst the whirlwind, feeling an inexplicable need to shield her from the onslaught. Excuse me. I called out, hesitation waning against the urgency rising in my chest. The man paused momentarily, his rage directed toward me. I don't think yelling helps anyone. We're all just trying to find our way here, aren't we? Don't you think she deserves to be heard too? A stillness enveloped the aisle where I stood, the air thick with disbelief at my interruption. But as I looked at the cashier, I saw a flicker of gratitude in her weary eyes, a connection sparked through the chaos. Did she feel me standing beside her, even if just amidst the turmoil? Sometimes, we're too close to the pain to see the good, but I hesitated, searching for the right words. But that doesn't mean we're not trying. Isn't that what we're all doing? The man glared at me, but there was a moment of hesitation in his posture. He was caught, struggling with the anger that had so fervently driven him. You think that's enough? Just connecting over small things while the world crumbles around us? No, I countered, my heart pounding hard. But it's a start. It's a lifeline in the storm we're facing together. Before he could respond, the cashier stepped forward, her voice more resolute now, laced with strength I hadn't seen before. I appreciate what you're saying. But you should also know that sometimes I have to make sacrifices to help others. We all do. Her honesty took the air from the room, leaving behind a haunting silence. The realization of her words hung heavily, an unintentional confession echoing between them. As the tension lingered, something shifted in the air, a flicker of understanding settling over the brewing storm. But just then, an unmistakable crash rippled through the store like shattered glass. Distant shouts erupted, drowning out any semblance of resolve. The grocery store suddenly felt like a pressure cooker, the lid ready to blow, and I stood in the center, precariously entangled in a reality that threatened to spin out of control. My heart raced. What had I just unwittingly uncovered about her? The cashier. Her sacrifices. This struggle. And now, with the chaos escalating around us, what would be the cost of standing up for kindness in the face of adversity? Would it drown us all? I took a shaky breath as the sound of crashing items ricocheted through the aisles, a painful disruption that shattered the brief moment of solidarity we had conjured amidst the storm. The man turned sharply at the sound, a flicker of concern mingling with his anger, and suddenly, the room felt like a fragile bubble, ready to pop at any moment. Stay back, I whispered to the cashier, my instincts kicking in, urging me to shield her from whatever chaos was about to unfold. But she looked at me, her expression resolute despite the fear that danced in her eyes. I have to help, she insisted, stepping toward the source of the commotion. Before I could protest, she darted down the aisle, and I followed, my heart pounding in sync with the chaos that continued to unfold. As we rounded the corner, I could see people scrambling, some dropping their bags and others reaching for their phones, creating a small whirlwind of panic that threatened to engulf the store. In the far corner, a shelf had toppled over, its contents spilling across the tile floor like a burst of color in a grayscale world. A small group of people were trying to right it, disarray painted across their faces. The cashier knelt beside them, her voice rising above the uncertainty, calling for calm. Everyone, we need to help each other. If we work together, we can clean this up. She was a beacon amidst the storm, her appeal for cooperation striking me deeply. It was a call that echoed with the same vulnerability she had just bared moments before. I watched her, struck by the purity of her intent in a moment charged with tension. Here was a person who understood sacrifice, who had taken it upon herself to be a part of this community and shoulder its burdens, even as her own were immense. Perhaps she saw in every customer before her a reflection of her struggles, the hardships she faced daily silently. As I stepped forward to lend a hand, I glanced back to see the man who had spiraled into rage now hesitating at the outskirts of the chaos, conflict brewing in his chest. He observed the scene unravel, his anger faltering under the weight of the human connection. A fleeting moment flickered in his eyes, a realization that perhaps the shadows of his own sacrifices resurfacing. Hey! I called out to him, my voice rising above the noise. Come on. This is about helping each other, remember. You said we're all struggling. Lend a hand. He met my gaze, the fire in his eyes waning, as if those words struck a chord within him. Reluctantly, he stepped forward into the throng, grappling with whatever inner conflict was warring behind the surface. Perhaps he too could recognize, however fleeting, the unity born from adversity. With a sense of collective urgency, we all bent to the task, working diligently to right the fallen shelf and restore order where chaos had thrived moments before. I noticed small gestures of kindness blooming, someone offering a hand to an older gentleman struggling to lift a heavy box, another reassuring a child who had begun to cry. It was a slow but profound transformation, a reminder of the strength found in togetherness, even when it seemed like we were all fighting our own battles. Finally, the shelf stood upright once more, a slightly wobbly reminder of the fragility of community. I caught the cashier's eye as we all stepped back, panting and weary, yet somehow tethered by the shared experience. Gratitude shone through the dust and sweat that clung to her brow. In that moment, beneath the surface of chaos, a flicker of hope ignited a promise that we could withstand this storm if we found a way to carry each other. However, as the adrenaline slowed, a cold gust of realization pricked at the edges of the warmth we'd just cultivated. The store's entrance swung open again, and a new figure appeared, one I hadn't seen before, a tall woman with an air of authority, flanked by two uniformed officers. Her voice cut through the murmurs, sharp and unwavering. What's going on here? There's been a complaint about the ongoing disruptions. Each word felt like a gust of bitter wind, snuffing out the small flicker of connection we had just forged. Tension returned, a new wave crashing over us, reminding everyone of the precarious edge precariously resting beneath our feet. "Ma'am, it's not what you think," the cashier spoke up, her voice trembling but firm. "We were just," but the woman held up a hand, her gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing on the man who had initially sparked the chaos. "You, come forward. What's your problem?" And just like that, the sense of unity we had fought so hard to build began dissolving, unraveling in the face of authority. I felt the weight of unsaid words and hidden truths hanging thickly in the air, pregnant with possibilities I couldn't decipher, leaving us all balanced on a precipice of uncertainty. Was the confrontation truly over? Or had I unwittingly initiated a conflict that would only escalate further? As the words hung heavy, I felt a flicker of dread ripple through me. What sacrifices were we still poised to make? And who would be left standing when the dust settled? The woman's authoritative stance filled the room like an unwelcome shadow, her presence embedding an anxiety that eclipsed the faint sense of unity we had formed. All eyes shifted nervously to the man, his brows knit with a mixture of defiance and fear. I could see him fighting to tether his emotions to something tangible, the weight of judgment swirling around him like a storm. "Stay calm," I whispered under my breath, but I could hardly convince myself. Every passing second stretched painfully, and the cashier's nod of determination seemed to fortify the resolve simmering within me. We had pulled together to nurture a fleeting bond, and now, we stood teetering on the brink. Would we collapse back into our separate worlds? "We just had a little incident," the cashier clarified, her voice wavering but refusing to retreat into despair. She stepped forward, positioning herself subtly between the man and the officers, an instinctive act of protection. Everyone was helping each other. We took care of the mess. Her words echoed as an anthem of resilience amidst distress. People began to shift, a few nodding in agreement, the memories of our shared struggle swirling in their minds. It was as if a collective heartbeat pulsed through the crowd, unwilling to let go of the light we had ignited only moments ago. "Can't you see there's enough going wrong in the world without turning on one another?" Another customer fired back, his voice carrying a firmness that I felt resonate within my own heart. "We're trying to support each other here." The officers shifted their weight, clearly unsure of how to respond to an evolving crowd that seemed increasingly united in their quiet defiance. For once, the chaos and turmoil might have pushed us towards something different, not just chaos but a desirable sense of belonging and solidarity. I was astounded by how quickly we had formed a fragile bond, a chorus of shared struggles harmonizing amidst the shouts and tension. But then the woman refocused her gaze on the man, narrowing her eyes in a way that sent a shiver running down my spine. "And you, sir? You need to control yourself. This kind of behavior has consequences." He flinched under the force of her words, glancing around as if searching for a lifeline in the eyes of strangers. I could see the fight within him, the wounded spirit wrestling with how to articulate his pain. It was a raw, vulnerable moment, unveiling the complexity of his soul, shadows lurking just beneath the surface. "Please," he finally murmured, desperation lacing his voice. "You don't understand. I lost my job last week. My kids, they depend on me. I'm doing my best." The truth emerged, the raw truth of his struggle falling like a heavy stone into the pool of silence. The crowd tensed, absorbing the weight of his admission. For a moment, we stood there, the air thick with empathy. Who among us had not tasted loss, battled unseen demons, or grappled with the suffocating pressure that sometimes threatened to drown us? In an unexpected turn, the cashier stepped closer to him, compassion threading through her expression. "We're all fighting our own battles, aren't we?" she said gently, her voice softening the edges of their discord. "But that doesn't mean we have to hurt each other." The officers exchanged looks, their initial authority wavering against this much stronger, emotional truth. I noticed one of them soften, shoulders easing as he regarded the man not as a troublemaker, but as a fellow human trying to navigate the jagged terrain of life. But just as I thought this moment might turn to something different, the authoritative woman stepped between them, refusing to yield. "This can't go on. Your actions." "What actions?" I interrupted, unable to contain myself any longer. His pain is real. Can't you see that? This is all connecting us. The tension crackled as her eyes landed on me, disbelief flashing across her features. And you think that excuses this? Unruliness breeds chaos, and chaos breeds desperation. I shot back, my heart racing. We don't need more reasons to divide us, her gaze hardened in response. If you want unity, you need to recognize the consequences of disorder. And at that moment, my heart sank. The idea of unity felt precarious as we were pulled back toward the edge of an abyss, dark and suffocating. What if this confrontation spiraled out of control? What if our small acts of kindness were not enough to shield us from the storm? As the officers began to step closer to the man, the world dissolved around me, and I felt a despair wash over me, a thrust of fear that this fragile bond we'd forged would shatter, leaving us nothing but disconnected souls once more. My stomach knotted as my thoughts raced. The cashier was still shrouded in her unyielding mask of determination. Despite the chaos threatening to erupt, I could almost believe we might yet find clarity together if only we could hold on. Then, just as this hope flickered, the man took a step backward, clearly shaking, vulnerability etched in every line of his face. I didn't mean to make things worse. He faltered, eyes glancing toward the exit, an impulse to flee draping itself over his shoulders, and I understood in that moment, he was ready to internalize this judgment, to bear the brunt of a world that often offered little in the way of second chances. But what consequences would he face if he walked away? Before I could voice my thoughts, before I could reach for him, he turned abruptly, shoulders tense like cold springs as he retreated from the crowd, the darkness rising around him. No. I called, desperate to bridge the widening gap. But my words echoed against a backdrop of authority and fear, and all I could do was watch as he slipped away, a heartbreaking silhouette against the blurring world. The pieces of our fragile connection tumbled like scattered leaves in the wind, uncertainty clinging to the air as I turned to the cashier, dread pulling at the base of my heart. What would we lose in the struggle for understanding? And was there still time to salvage what flickers of hope tethered us to one another? The storm raged on, a relentless reminder that sacrifice is often the cost of connection, and I could only stand frozen, torn between the choices forged in the chaos, the shadows behind my own heart dimming with every passing breath. The room felt suffocating as the last vestiges of the man's presence faded into the distance. The officers exchanged somber glances, their faces betraying a sense of uncertainty, perhaps even regret. The cashier, whose fierce resolve had only moments ago kindled a glimmer of hope, now stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Is he coming back? I dared to whisper, my heart pounding in my ears, as if echoing the uncertainty of what had just transpired. I don't know. The cashier's voice wavered, yet within it lacked the tenacity I clung to, despite the darkening atmosphere. But he shouldn't have to bear this alone. We shouldn't let him slip away. The surrounding customers began to murmur, sensing the swell of questions and unease that had engulfed the room. It was as if the warmth we had shared moments before had been extinguished, leaving us with echoes of compassion shadowed by the fear of judgment. I could see the resignation creep into several faces, uncertainty clouding their expression like a thick fog, but others subtly leaned toward the cashier, their eyes igniting with camaraderie. A middle-aged man with a weathered face stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. We can't let him be the only one taking the weight of this. Where did he go? He might be in the alley. It's a dead end behind the store. The urgency in her voice overcame her momentary hesitation. We should go after him. Several nods emerged from the gathering crowd, a flickering urgency igniting the remnants of our unity. However, I hesitated, tethered by the fear that pursuing him might only deepen this fracture among us. I am going with you, I finally said, the determination rising within me. I glanced at the cashier and saw in her eyes the same fire I felt igniting in my own chest. We owe it to him. Without waiting for a reply, I rushed toward the store's back exit, my heart racing in tandem with the shuffling sounds of those following me. Another voice joined in, a young woman with tear-streaked cheeks who reached out to me. Please, I want to help too. There was a palpable energy surrounding us, the collective heartbeat morphing into a chant of compassion. We burst into the alley, the cold air biting at our skin as we searched for any sign of the man. Shadows twisted and turned as we called out his name, each echoing plea sending me deeper into despair. The weight of guilt settled heavily in my chest. We should have done more, we should have eased his pain rather than let him flee into the abyss of loneliness, and it was there, tucked beneath a flickering streetlight, that we found him, slumped against the wall with his head bowed, a defeated soul radiating heartbreak. His form was silhouetted against the pale glow, an image indelibly etched into my memory. Please, don't go. I took a hesitant step forward, feeling the world shrink around us. We're here for you, his head slowly lifted, eyes shimmering with pain and fear. Why? After everything, why do you care? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken anguish. Because we all feel lost at times, I replied. It's not just you. We're fighting our battles too. We don't have to do it alone. A flicker of vulnerability softened his hardened gaze, but uncertainty still coiled around him. What if they come after me? What if they see me as a failure again? A chill swept through my heart. Then why change their minds? I implored, each word a thread hoping to weave a new tapestry of connection. You don't have to carry that weight alone. You've already ignited something in USA's sense of togetherness. Please, let us stand with you. The other customers coaxed their way closer, forming a small circle of support around him. The young woman I had met earlier squeezed his hand gently, her sincerity pouring through the gesture. We're stronger than we think, she whispered, tears pooling once again in her eyes, and then, a miraculous warmth wove through the chill that bound us. Despite the overwhelming uncertainty of the moment, I could feel something shifting, a budding strength surge within me, a shared conviction blossoming like a fragile flower through cracked pavement. But just as a tentative smile appeared on the man's face, a familiar voice cut through the silencia voice I surveyed with trepidation. The authoritative woman from the store had found us, flanked by both officers whose expressions were now resolute. Step away from him, she commanded, her eyes blazing with a mix of fury and righteousness. This isn't a solution. You're making a mockery of the LAW. As the crowd instinctively tensed, the man's expression fell into despair, shadows returning to his features. I'm sorry, he whispered, the light behind his eyes flickering as if on the verge of extinguishing. I never meant to cause all this trouble. No. My voice came out louder than I intended, carrying the weight of the moment into the impending storm. You're not trouble. You're one of us. You deserve understanding. But before I could say anything further, the officer stepped forward, eyes focused on the man, the fear surrounding him palpable. Fire surged within me, igniting a desire to stand firm and protect this fragile circle we had contemplated. Heart thumping wildly, I took a step ahead, ready to challenge whatever authority they wielded over our connections. If we break him apart, we break apart our unity too, I declared, agony coursing through me as I faced the authoritative woman. Do you really want to be part of that? Is that the world you want to create? And in that heartbeat where time froze, I saw the glint of something in her eyes, perhaps recognition or doubt, even vulnerability. But it was gone before I could grasp it. Then the ground beneath us trembled with the weight of possibilities, and I felt that we were teetering dangerously close to the edge of something monumental. The outcome remained uncertain, the stakes high. Whatever paths lay ahead, whether shaped by compassion or hardened by fear, this moment would etch itself into our stories, a testament to the delicate balance of human connection and sacrifice. An uneasy silence engulfed the alley, thick with tension as the officers pressed forward, a palpable divide forming between their rigid authority and the warmth of our shared resolve. The shadowy figure of the man hunched against the wall looked smaller, fragile, as the flickering streetlight cast him in a transient glow, a vulnerability radiating from him that felt almost suffocating. Stand back, the authoritative woman repeated, her tone unwavering. You're putting yourselves in danger. This isn't your fight, and you're creating chaos where there should be order, chaos. I challenged, the desperation raw in my voice. No, this is compassion. This is humanity existing in its truest form. You don't understand what he's endured, but I understand the law, she snapped back, her eyes cold but the veins in her throat pulsing with something unnameable. And he has broken it. You might think you're helping, but you're only enabling more trouble. I would rather enable compassion than ignorance, I replied, my heart pounding to the drum of conviction. This man's worth is not measured in mistakes. As my words faded into the heavy air, I caught a brief glimpse of vulnerability, almost imperceptible, within her steely demeanor. It shattered for a moment, revealing a flicker of doubt behind her eyes. You don't know what you're asking for. I know enough, I pressed. I know his story is dangerous, but it's also human, just like all of ours. I turned back to the man, whose expression was now a swirling storm of fear and shame. You're not alone in this. Please, don't let them drive you back into the shadows. But the warmth I sought to inspire began to wane as the officers moved closer, their intentions unreadable. I felt the collective breath of our group hitch, a paralyzing moment before an inevitable tide. Yet amid the tension, I glimpsed the cashier at the fringe of our circle, her eyes shimmering in the alley lights, igniting a spark of hope. Let's not forget why we're here, she overcame the oppressive silence, stepping forward into the space separating us from the authorities. This isn't chaos, it's care. We are standing together because no one deserves to feel alone in their suffering, especially not him. The world has enough walls, we're here to break them down. But she gestured to the officers, defiance gleaming in her eyes. You hold the power to build bridges instead. Is that what you really want? The officer vented, brows furrowing with skepticism. To stand in defiance against the very laws that protect you. Think about the consequences. The cashier took a deep breath, steadying her voice. No, I want to see a world where compassion reigns over judgment. Let this be a turning point. Choose to see the person before you, not just another statistic. I held my breath, waiting for the officer's response, desperate for some glimmer of acceptance. But instead, the heaviness in the air intensified, becoming nearly unbearable. Each second that passed felt like an eternity, an unyielding weight pressing down on us all, and just when it seemed as if a small vein of understanding would bloom, a sudden commotion erupted from the entrance of the alleyway, the dim buzz of voices growing rapidly louder. A crowd had gathered, their faces a collage of curiosity, concern, and judgment. They spilled into the alley, unaware of the delicate moment unfolding. I turned to see the familiar figures pushing through our local news crew. The bright lights of their cameras almost felt blinding against the backdrop of our gathering, illuminating the very depths of fear we had been trying to navigate. I could see the horror reflected in the man's eyes, who shrunk further into himself, his past and present teetering dangerously close to public spectacle. Get away from him! I shouted, fear and frustration spilling from my lips. This isn't a show. You're about to take something precious away. The officers appeared unfazed, seeming to welcome the additional scrutiny as they prepared to take more stringent action. Tension surged through our group as apprehension seeped into our hearts, the man's face twisting. In dread. It was then that I felt a gentle touch on my arm, a simple, clear weight of presence that sent a ripple of calm through me. The young woman who had reached out earlier stood beside me, her expression resolute. They can't take away our strength. We have to stand firm. Yes, I breathed, finding resolve in our conviction. For him. For us all. With one steadying gesture, I rallied the others, reaching out to form a protective fence around the man. We stood shoulder to shoulder, arms linked, a living barrier against the rushing tide of judgment. But in the midst of our act of solidarity, the authoritative woman's voice broke through the tumult, cold and unwavering. Back away from him, or we'll be forced to take action. And just then, as uncertainty loomed large above us, a shout echoed from the back of the crowd, one that sent icy fingers of trepidation creeping down my spine. I know him. He's not who you think he is. I stunned wide upon the familiar figure stepping forward from the gathering, a figure I never expected to see again. A face from the man's past, emerging like a haunting specter to challenge the fragile hope we desperately clung to. Who are you? I managed to stammer, feeling the pulse of the moment shift as dread seeped through our collective resolve. The space between us seemed to widen, each heart drumming louder, echoing the fragility of our conviction as we collectively braced for the unraveling truth that was about to shatter the delicate balance we fought to protect. As the figure emerged from the crowd, recognition flashed like lightning through my minder mix of disbelief and heartache. Marcus. The name echoed in my thoughts, a specter I had never wanted to confront, yet here he was, dragging shadows from the depths of the past into the bright light of this unbearable present. Marcus, the man against the wall whispered, his voice barely slicing through the heavy atmosphere. The weight of the realization crashed over me, and in that moment, time seemed to slow. Do you know him? I asked, turning to the figure who stood resolute in his distress. My heart pounded in my chest, hope and fear waging an internal war. I do, Marcus replied, his voice steady but shaky, like a tightrope pulled taut against the winds of uncertainty. I know exactly who he is and what you all think he's done. The murmurs in the crowd intensified, swirling like a tempest around us, fueled by revelations that had yet to come. He's a criminal, one voice called out, laced with disdain. He deserves to be punished. Justice isn't just about punishment, I shouted back, desperation breaking through the cracks of my composure. It's about understanding. Ignoring the chaos, Marcus pressed onward, desperation mingling with urgency in his eyes. He didn't do it. You have to believe me. My heart sank further into the abyss, disbelief coiled tightly in my stomach. What do you mean? He didn't do what? Whatever you think happened, whatever you think he is, it's a misunderstanding, Marcus said, stepping closer. He was framed. The evidence against him was manipulated. I know this because I was there. The crowd gasped, a tidal wave of interest and judgment colliding in a single breath. You're just trying to protect a criminal. Someone shouted, emboldened by the unfolding drama and readying for battle. No. No. You don't understand. Marcus pressed on, his voice rising above their jeers. He's a good man. He's been fighting for his life just like so many of us do every day. It's not fair to judge him when we don't know the whole story. The hardness in the officer's gaze faltered for a mere moment, the flicker of doubt returning with renewed vigor. As I watched this psychological duel unfold, hope bloomed within the confines of my heart, a fragile flower amidst the wreckage of uncertainty. Then tell us the truth. I shouted, urging Marcus forward, desperate for clarity. Whatever it is, we need to hear it now. I will, he breathed, standing straighter as he faced the crowd. But I need you all to listen, truly listen. This isn't just about him, this is about all of us, about the lives we lead and the flaws embedded within them. The murmurs died down, replaced by a breathless silence tinged with anticipation. It was a brief reprieve from the chaos, a moment of vulnerability shared in the air. It's not just his past, it's how people see him. Yes, mistakes were made, but isn't that true for everyone? The real crime would be letting fear dictate our understanding. Marcus, please, the man's voice cracked, emotion choking him as he sank to the ground, trembling. But Marcus continued, resolute as ever. When he was at his lowest, attacked for the choices he made in desperation, I watched him try to rise up again only to be met with stone walls at every turn. The system failed him long before he ever had a chance to fail himself. What are you asking us to do? The authoritative woman finally interjected, her tone shifting ever so slightly, an inflection of something that resembled empathy breaking through her icy facade. See him. Marcus pleaded, glancing back at the man's fragile figure who bore the weight of the world on his narrowed shoulders. See him for who he truly is, a brother, a friend, a survivor who is desperate for a chance. Hope glimmered anew, scattered like stars in a fading twilight, yet equally dangerous. Suddenly, the intricacies of feelings unspooled like tangled threads, weaving between my heart and the collective emotions of the crowd who now stood equally divided. No one should face this alone, I urged, feeling the warmth of the cashier's presence beside me grounding me. This is our fight, too. We can find a way to change the narrative together. Then came a sharp scream from the back of the gathering, louder than before, raw and haunting. Someone's been hurt. The crowd shifted, panic rippling through them as chaos began brewing anew, snapping us back into the moment. A woman, pale and frantic, burst through the throng, clutching her side, where dark red bled through her shirt in stark contrast to the chaos surrounding us. "Please, help me," she gasped, her eyes wide with fear, and for a moment, everything froze, a new, desperate crisis looming on the horizon. The officers looked conflicted, torn between their original mission and the undeniable emergency thrust before them. In that single moment, I realized this wasn't merely a confrontation, it was a ripple effect of every shattered story colliding, revealing the cracks in all of our lives that connected us together. And as we faced the new challenge, the question loomed larger than ever: was there still enough of us left to unite in compassion before it all came crashing down? As the woman staggered toward us, desperation flickering in her eyes, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The realization that violence had intruded upon our gathering shifted the energy from one of confrontation to unified concern. The crowd, which had earlier been divided by fear and judgment, seemed to sway in a collective breath, the recognition of our shared humanity, however fleeting. "Someone call an ambulance," shouted a voice that I didn't recognize, slicing through the tension. Yet confusion hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as medical help felt epochs away in this moment of crisis. The officers, who stood like ancient sentinels, hesitated as they weighed their options. The delicate balance of enforcing responsibility against the instinct to help teetered precariously before us. "Marcus," I called out, urgency anchoring my voice. "What should we do?" "Stay calm," he replied, though the tremor in his voice betrayed the gravity of the situation. "We need to stop the bleeding. I have some training, a few years in first aid. I could try to help." Without hesitating, Marcus moved swiftly past the gathering, his eyes sharp and focused. He knelt beside the fallen woman and gently peeled away the fabric she clutched, revealing a deep wound, anguish etched across her face. "Don't worry, I'm here," he murmured, positioning himself between her and the crowd, his hand steady despite the chaos unraveling around us. "Just breathe." I moved closer, feeling an inexplicable urge to provide support, as though his strength was something I could siphon off. "I'm here too. What do you need from me?" "Get something to apply pressure," Marcus said, his voice calm even as his actions were anything but. "It needs to stop bleeding." I looked around, frantic, spotting a makeshift sign made from cardboard and taped to a nearby pole. Without a second thought, I dashed towards it, ripping it down and returning, tears brimming as I clamped it over the woman's injury. "Right here," I urged, insisting she look at me. Her panicked eyes found mine, and I willed her to accept my presence as a lifeboat amidst her storm. "Stay with me. You're safe," I soothed her. "Marcus is here, you're not alone." His hand skillfully grasped the edges of the sign, applying pressure as he spoke gently to her, urging her to focus on his voice. "What's your name?" "Clara," she gasped, her breath a harsh whisper. "Clara, you've got this," he responded, never losing that fragile thread of calming chaos. "You just need to keep breathing. We're going to take care of you." In those fraught moments, the chaotic uproar surrounding us began to quiet, the crowd's energy shifting from a fear-driven mob to a circle of support, a living testament that humanity can still breathe when life is precarious. Eyes that had shone with judgment now reflected concern, fear replaced by a shared determination to protect. Yet as Clara's breath began to slow, I felt a twinge of dread creeping in, something sinister lurking at the edges of this hopeful harmony. "Is someone on the way?" I inquired, eyeing the officers, their expressions a blend of worry and indecision. I turned, surprised to see a glimmer of change in the authoritative woman's gaze. Driven by compassion, she stepped forward, vowing, "I'll make the call myself." Hope flickered anew. I prayed silently that amid the human turmoil, perhaps something precious could emerge. But just as Clara's breathing steadied, I noticed a shadow. Marcus' gaze flitted across the crowd, alert and searching before landing on me. "Get ready," he murmured. "Stay aware." "What do you mean?" I asked, My heart pounding against my ribs. Before he could respond, a figure emerged from the throng. It was a young man, frantic, eyes wide as if he had pierced through a fabric of reality. "Marcus! They are coming for you!" he shouted, a rush of urgency underlying the chaos of his words. "You need to leave." The audible gasps of the crowd filled the space as I took a step back. The weight of that declaration crashed down on me, sending fractures through my uncertain determination. "What? Why?" Marcus asked, brow furrowing, shifting into a protective stance before Clara. "They know you're here. You need to run," the young man implored, desperation leaking through his every breath. The world spun as I grappled with what this meant. Images of a life undone by fear twisted in my mind. Marcus was still entwined in the throes of his past, and now those shadows threatened to engulf him once more, just as we'd begun to forge a path toward understanding. "Marcus, you can't leave," I shouted, but it was more a plea than a command. Not now, there's too much at stake, but as the escalating panic spread, so too did the realization that time was slipping through our fingers. The fragile core we had built began to tremble, and the monster of despair loomed just beyond the horizon, ready to devour us whole. In that moment, everything hung in the balance, hope and anguish entwined, leaving me with a single question: could we fight for clarity, or were we too late? As I stood there, the world around me felt both achingly familiar and terrifyingly alien, a storm of voices swirling in chaos. I watched Marcus's face twist in anguish, the weight of an impossible choice looming above us. The frantic eyes of the young man warned of imminent danger. We had barely begun to understand. The man crumpled against the wall, and I could feel threads of fear entwining with the threads of hope we had just painstakingly woven. "Marcus, please," I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. "You can't leave us. Not when we have the chance to change everything, to prove that kindness can exist, that compassion is powerful." Behind me, Clara's fragile breathing steadied, a small flicker of hope ignited by our unity, but it felt precarious, the kind carpet woven over a hidden trap. I turned back to Marcus, searching his eyes for the light I knew flickered within him. "You have to stay. You're the key to unlocking this moment." Stepping closer, I could see the conflict rippling beneath his surface, a reflection of the turmoil thrumming through my own heart. "What they did to you was wrong, but don't let fear push you back into the dark. Show them they can't silence the truth." He hesitated, vulnerability etched into every line of his being. "But if they find me, what if they use me to tear apart what you fought for?" Before I could respond, the chaos shifted again. Shouts of dissent rose from the crowd, their energy divided as they flicked glances between Marcus and Clara. The fear of what lay just beyond our grasp began bouncing off the walls, echoing uncertainties that amplified inside me. I needed to act, to anchor my words in the tide of emotion swirling around us. "Listen." I raised my voice, hoping to find the collective strength amidst the tumult. "We are all standing here because we refuse to let the noise and fury drown out the pain within us. You fought for us, now let us stand together. Marcus is part of this story, embodies our resilience. We can't let them take that away." Silence enveloped the alley, a breath held captive as eyes shifted toward my words, awaiting any further threads to latch onto. Each of us fights battles hidden beneath the surface. The man we sought to save knows what it means to be cast aside, and that mirrors all of us in this chaotic world. We need his voice. Clara's pained expression softened as she whispered, "Stay with us, Marcus." It sounded small yet powerful, a plea rising above the tide of uncertainty, barely coaxing its way past the jagged cracks in our situation. The authoritative woman, though still set in her position, bore an unusual flicker of curiosity, perhaps even the slightest ember of understanding. "This isn't a matter of legality anymore," she said, the hard edges of her words losing some of their bite. "What do you want, Marcus?" The question dropped like a stone into the previously turbulent waters, carving out the unnavigable depths that lay beneath the surface. He inhaled sharply, a mix of emotions flooding his eyes as he searched for the right answer, an affirmation that would bridge the expanse separating us from understanding. "I want to change the narrative," Marcus replied, finally lifting his chin as he found strength in the chorus of support around him. This is bigger than just me. It's about every single person who has been cast into the margins. We need to show the world that we're more than just our mistakes, more than our fears. And in that moment, everything shifted. The crowd shifted, grasping the gravity of his words. Bonds were forged anew amid whispered reassurances and promises of solidarity. Hope glimmered, igniting flames long buried beneath the weight of despair. Then let's do it together, I urged, the emotions swelling within me melding into a single thought, a truth rising against the tide. Let's shape a story where compassion reigns instead of chaos. We can bridge the divide. We will not hide, we will stand together. The authoritative woman turned within our circle, tension melting into awareness. But that change requires, not just words, but action, she finally said, her voice wavering slightly. If we're to shift this narrative, every voice needs to be heard. We need to act, not out of fear, but out of connection and compassion. With a steadying breath, I nodded, the essence of bravery surging forth, giving shape to our newfound resolve. Then let's unite as a community. Together, Marcus echoed. Let's stand together not just for me, but for everyone who feels unseen. As he spoke, a shift happened. No longer were we travelers barricaded within our private pains, we were a cadre, ready to embrace the war within and emerge together as a force against division. The young man who had brought Marcus into the light stood to my left, a badge of solidarity, a shared understanding glimmering in our eyes. The crowd echoed with murmurs of agreement, a movement born from vulnerability embedding itself within the hearts of all present. Every person, every struggle, every tear now had a place in the dialogue of our survival. The stakes reshaped themselves, the air thick with a sense of impending change, as if hope itself had finally broken through the horizon. As the sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, I knew we had to act fast. I turned to Clara, eyes set with purpose. You'll be okay, I told her, my voice strong and unwavering. Yes, Marcus agreed, crouching beside her again. You're strong, and we will make sure you're cared for until you're back on your feet. The officer seemed to contemplate the softening around us, suddenly realizing that we weren't simply an unruly throng. We were a community. Bonds formed in the fire of connection only now beginning to ignite, rewriting the script we had long been bound to carry. As the paramedics arrived, they conferred not with fear, but with understanding, taking Clara from our side seamlessly as we, as a collective, watched hope rise like dawn against drifting shadows. And that's when I felt a realization towering over me, casting brilliance against the backdrop of uncertainty. Amidst the intertwining threads of loss and sacrifice surged the unfurling promise of connection, forgiveness, and solidarity. From that day on, I would carry the knowledge that when we refuse to yield to despair, when we fight together, we can honor our shared humanity, reminding ourselves that we are so much more than the remnants of pain we've carried. With every breath, we become echoes of hope, undeniably connected, crafting a beautiful tapestry against adversity. As the night fell, I turned back to Marcus and the others, a smile coursing through me like a gentle surge. Let's promise to carry this light forward, I whispered, and never let fear cast shadows over our compassion again. We stood together, facing the horizon where possibilities blossomed into the dawn, united against whatever storms loomed ahead. In that moment of communion, I finally understood love, through all its sacrifices, shines brightest when shared among those brave enough to hold on. The world will listen, I declared, resolute. And in the quiet aftermath, amidst fading sirens and the soft hum of the world awakening, I felt peace cascade over me. We were ready for whatever came next, as long as we held hands through the dark. Forever linked in the tapestry of hope unfurling before us.